We are creatures of desire. What we most desire is meaning. What makes us suffer most is a lack of meaning.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Marital therapist, author, and communications trainer Andrew G. Marshall invites guests from all walks of life to discuss what makes life meaningful.
Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall. Welcome to The Meaningful Life. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, and wherever you find your podcasts. A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This year, I am throwing a Christmas party, and I have invited one of my former witnesses back to help me celebrate. Parties mean games, and I've devised a simple game where there are different Christmas-themed topics and we both have to tell a story or reveal something about our tastes. Or if I'm greedy, both. It is Christmas after all. I thought, who would love to play games? And I knew immediately the answer. Cate Mackenzie. Cate is an accredited sex and relationship therapist, a love coach, and an artist who offers therapy, coaching, and workshops to individuals and couples. She came on The Meaningful Life to talk about flirting, and if you haven't heard the episode, it's well worth checking out. Now, Cate, was I right? Do you enjoy playing games?
Do you know what? It's so interesting, isn't it? It's so interesting. I do, but actually that's a really great question because I think I'm coming more into that now. And what I would have chosen earlier on is the kind of more active, like the charades I do like a lot of word games, but actually I think there's something about getting older for me is about the pleasures of games, something just for the pure simplicity of playing.
Because we lose that from children, don't we? I mean, and I once went to a festival and they had a workshop where we just played old games we played as children, like Grandfather's Footsteps and What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf, and British Bulldog. I mean, we had the most wonderful time possible.
Love that. I went to Sketch yesterday. I don't know if you're familiar with Sketch. It's near Oxford Circus. It's a tea, drink and dinner place that is like stepping into a fantasy movie. So you could have one room, it's literally got trees on the ceilings and lights everywhere. I was in another room which had neon lights everywhere, wallpaper everywhere, colours everywhere. And as we were having tea and cake, a ballerina danced around. And then upstairs there were toilets that were eggs, pod eggs that you opened to go to the toilet. And a woman dressed as a French maid completely, but she was part of the whole scene. And then the stairs everywhere was decorated and they employ artists to do themes. There's an artist who's done the winter theme. What am I saying? It just reminded me, and now I'm doing this with you today, it reminded me that one side of Christmas, because there's many different sides and people have different relationships with Christmas because it can be intense. But one side is that can we go into fairy tale wonderland of lights and magic and story time and games, like you said, and can we play? Obviously, there's like anything, there's the shadow sides and people's stress and difficulties, but there is a side to Christmas which is all of that. And I was in it, literally feeling like I'm in a film set, but the best sort of film set with teacups, and all of them waitresses were dressed in unusual dresses that looked velvet or were tied up like 1940s dress. Everything was evocative of taking you into different time and spaces, and that's play, isn't it? Play helps you come out of I've got to get that done and takes you into different realms. And yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we can reclaim play.
So are you a Christmas fairy or a Grinch?
So this is the thing. I think that, I say obviously as a kid, not every kid loves Christmas, but I think there can be for some children that kind of excitement around Christmas. And then I think for me, there sometimes could be stresses around, because sometimes people save up the tensions just for Christmas Day, and it just all comes out for Christmas Day. And then there's all that pressure. You should be here, you should be there, you should be this, you should be that. And for some years, I used to run retreats on Christmas Day, work for organisations that ran retreats. I loved that because I really liked the idea of service. So that really worked for me. I'd bring my mum, but there would be all these other people who had maybe nowhere else to go, and there'd be a retreat situation. I loved that because sometimes it's complex. How do these Christmas things fit together? Who wants what? How am I? How are they? Because I love the quiet of that time of year, because if you work and you're freelance self-employed as I am, that Christmas week is utter quiet for me. Everything turns off. And I have often a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, I just have quiet. So in the last few years, I've quite often had it by myself, which I've absolutely loved. Just switch off, peace. Last year I had quite a lot of time just by myself. And then I might ring people, or I like the idea of thinking of people, having intentions. And I might ring a friend, and when we might think of people. Or where I live in Brighton, there might be some projects with some places that open with people equally who may have nowhere else to go. And I also love that. I feel really sacred being in certain places, which is bringing everybody together. Because I think sometimes Christmas can get a bit exclusive, and sometimes there are people without people to be with, or without families, or without all kinds of things. And suddenly on Christmas Day, they're meant to be on their own, and they suddenly have to make up plans. So I've quite enjoyed that. But this year I'm doing something very different, and I'm going to have my mum and be with some friends. And I know lots of people do that. They do the intentional Christmases where they put it together how they want it. And I seem to be doing that. And that feels lovely. So a bit complex answer, isn't it? But yeah.
So let's have the first category. What was your best Christmas?
I think it's now. I mean, apart from being a kid, that kind of, and you wake at 4 a.m. and discover one of your parents is Father Christmas, but you've got that excitement about presents. And I think there was a lot of excitement growing up. I think it's now. I've covered my house for the first time in my life in fairy lights, outside and inside, the hallways, everywhere. And I have a little tree with lights. And I think you just said it. There's a kind of like reclaiming. And I think I'm doing it now. And my house is all lit up. Everywhere's lit up. And I went to London, and Christiane Dior was covered in lit up seahorses and all the lights in Oxford Street. And because I live in Brighton, I had this privilege of I could just pop to London and see the lights, and pop back to Brighton. But, I'm 56, which I'm thrilled about, and I'm getting this chance to kind of see things in a new way. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, whereas I think sometimes I could think, I could see it in a different way. Oh, Christmas is so busy and I have to do this. Now I'm seeing it like, this is fun and interesting. It's choice. So my best Christmas is now.
So it's interesting you were talking about Christmas past, because what I've nominated is an age, and I think I was about 5, because we moved house when I was 6. So it was in the original house in Northampton where we used to live. And I remember lying in bed with my eyes closed and believing 100% in Father Christmas, that he was going to be coming to my room and he was going to leave this huge stocking. I'd left out my father's old rugby sock, and it was over the end of the bed. And I knew that in the morning it would be full, but I couldn't see him because he wouldn't come if I actually looked out. And I can still remember that bubble of magic lying in my bed, just full of the mystery and the belief in a magical world. And I'm actually feeling quite emotional thinking about it, because here I am at 65. And one of the things I've been doing this year and will continue next year is training in shamanism, which is sort of about allowing us to step into the magic that's all around us that we sort of don't see. And I bring it into my work, and, I will sometimes help somebody in a sort of more than just give love to yourself when you were 10 years old and this unfortunate thing happened, but actually allowing them to go into a deep trance and sort of step out of their heart and meet themselves at that age and have a conversation with them. And it is always an incredibly powerful, and I'm going to use the word again, magical experience. And the first time I really experienced magic was in that bedroom all those years ago. So I think that's my best ever Christmas.
I love that so much, and I really relate. It's deeply touching, and it's lovely because the way you're sharing brings a lot of magical memories up for me about Christmas and the way Christmas can be. Because I think sometimes I've judged it. There's commercialism and there's nothing wrong with presents, but is it just about presents? What about people? Is it exclusive? But I think actually I'm experiencing this, and the way you shared it is there's so much magic and wonder, and that wonder of I love the sock. I had my father's old stocking, and that was also magical because evocative of, it was old and it had little bits of satin, and so it's kind of it was very evocative to have my father's old. What was his little boy childhood like? It's all these things. I think that's wonderful, and I love the shamanic thing. People I like to follow and listen and connect to often talk about taking 12 days off over Christmas and really making each day sacred, of going within and really having a lot of quiet, which I've given myself for the last few years. This year I'm going to connect more, but I've given myself a lot of that quiet and being with the stillness and the silence in a magical way, and nature, and noticing and allowing that fertile darkness of this time of year, allowing that. And I've really, really given myself that a lot the last few years, which has been very special. Yeah.
So everything has a shadow side. So we have the best Christmas, and then we're going to have the worst Christmas. So what has been your worst Christmas?
Well, I hope it's all right to say this, but my parents split when I was about 13 years old, and it was difficult, I think, for them both. And my mum, both my parents adore Christmas. It's a big thing for them. And we had Christmas just with my mum and her boyfriend at the time. And we were probably, lazy teenagers, me and my sisters, and just kind of wanting to be slow and relaxed. And she said, it's the day of tapes. People had tapes. And she had a Christmas tape. Could someone get the Christmas tape and put it on? And nobody could be bothered.
Ooh.
She got so upset. She chucked us all out. So the boyfriend had to walk to North London. We were in South Kensington. The boyfriend had to walk to his aunt's in North London. And me and my sisters had nowhere to go. So we had to stand on the steps outside till my mother calmed down. And we were like, you're like, Christmas Day. And it's not, I hope I'm not being mean, because I have empathy. She had a vision of Christmas that wasn't getting fulfilled, and people weren't joining in the way she would like. I can understand that now. And the Christmas tape tipped it. And she just went, all of you out. But we're stood on the steps going, there's nowhere to go. At that point, probably nowadays, things are open. But at that point, this is in the 1980s, Christmas Day was one of those days where everything was closed. So we stood on the steps wondering what to do. And then eventually my mother let us back in again. And actually, she's a sweetheart, but I kind of get it. And I think that's what happens, is that people get tense. They've got this image of Christmas. It's got to pull off. And it's like Christmas Day can bring these things together. I remember my grandfather, I'm part Welsh, and my grandfather would go round all the neighbours for Christmas drinks on Christmas morning every year and be late for Christmas lunch, which would mean my grandmother and probably be a bit tipsy, and my grandmother would go nuts because she would have made so much effort over the food. It was every year, and they had a rhythm of this, and I think that's what happens a lot with people's Christmases, which is maybe why I got a bit avoidant for some years and thought, I'll just do my own quiet version, because sometimes there can be all this build up, and then the strange thing of eating at 3, and people have been eating all day, and those that drink might be drinking all day, so they're a bit drunk by a certain time. So there's my worst Christmas. There we go.
And my worst Christmas, I'm afraid this is also going to be emotional. My partner was exceedingly ill, and we were doing a goose. Have you ever cooked a goose?
No.
Well, they're incredibly difficult to cook because you have to cook them for a long time, and there's a lot of grease that you have to do off. And anyway, my partner was going to cook this goose for me and 2 friends. And on Christmas Eve, he fell very sick. very, very sick. And so I went out to see, in fact, the same friends on Christmas Eve on my own. And then on Christmas Day, when I was faced with cooking and nursing, I just said, I cannot cope with this. So I took the goose round to my friend and said, here's your Christmas lunch. And, my partner couldn't eat anything. And I think I had something frozen. And I sort of stepped out of Christmas. But it's possibly one of the first times in my life where I come from a tradition where you grit your teeth and you go for it, because actually getting everybody to help me in the kitchen and we're all mucking in, and, the fact that my partner was ill upstairs shouldn't have actually stopped us. And we could have all gone up and sung, a song or something round the bed, sort of kind of thing. But first and probably the only time in my life, I just sort of gave up. I said, I just can't cope with this anymore. And that's just sort of pure desperation of just saying, I can't cope with this Christmas, and stepping out of it. And, I wish I hadn't, but that's the nature of life. We make mistakes.
That was a mistake, you feel?
I feel it was a mistake that, I think it made him feel more miserable that I was just on my own downstairs.
Oh, I see.
My friends were sort of abandoned. They found other friends to go round for Christmas, so it wasn't the end of the world. And I just felt so incredibly miserable and helpless and hopeless. And, it wouldn't have been, one of the best Christmases, but I think if I had pushed on and actually cooked that blooming goose, however good or bad it would have been, it would have been better, because we have to accept and face the hardships of life. Whereas I just said, I'm not doing this. And we don't really have that choice. We have to do it, whether we want it or not, sort of thing, I think is how I feel now.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds really hard.
But fortunately, it was many years ago, so I can talk about it. And actually, this time I didn't actually get emotional, so maybe I'm making progress over
Yeah. I think this is the thing with Christmas. I don't know if you feel that, but it heightens it, which is, I was always amazed. I've got a friend, and he used to go each year to go and stay with an arguing couple. And
was that as penance or as a celebration?
You know what he felt? His parents had passed away or died, or whatever term is preferred, but he'd grown up with arguing parents, and there was something about being there at Christmas, on Christmas Day, with an arguing couple, and like almost shamanic, kind of almost being prayerful and meditational about not wanting to change anything, not wanting to make them different, kind of being there as a friend, and just allowing them to be what they were and being there. I found that extraordinary, because I was like, oh, wow, for Christmas Day, which already can be an intense day, going and actually deliberately being with people who are going to argue. I was amazed.
Stepping into George and Martha from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Yes, exactly. That's what it was. And he said there was something about that, to just be with, especially on Christmas Day, that height of the year, that kind of like that solstice, shamanic terms. It is a profound time, the Christ energy, not Jesus Christ, but that kind of light change with the darkest day, and that traditionally that change is quite a heightened time. And so for him, he was like, almost like, I'm going to be with all my shadow sides from what I grew up with. Like, he was going there as a friend, but I'm not going to reject them arguing. I'm going to just be with them and say thank you for letting this touch me and move me, which sounds an extraordinary thing to say, but he would do this. If he was really ill or had difficult experiences, in the middle of it, he would say thank you, because he kind of knew something was being accessed and changing inside him at the same time. Yeah.
So the next category, your favourite or famous Christmas movie. What have you got?
Miracle on 34th Street for me, which is about a woman, American movie, a woman who meets an old man with a beard who looks a bit like Father Christmas, and it kind of turns out he is Father Christmas. And I think it's a bit linked to what you were saying earlier, that there is this thing about Christmas potentially which allows the possibility of more, than just the mundane, ordinary life, and that there is generosity, there is care, there is that Jupiterian figure. Maybe there is that possibility of magic in our lives, and that film does it for me. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go for a magical film as well, but it's magical and ridiculous at the same time. Have you ever seen the Christmas Carol Muppet version?
Oh, yes. Wonderful.
And
What you
Michael
got?
Caine plays Scrooge,
Oh, yes.
and he's very good. And all the Muppets play all the rest of the characters. So Kermit is Bob Cratchit, I think is his name, and Mrs. Cratchit is Miss Piggy. And this story, I love Christmas Carol. And I mean, one of these years, I must actually do it with a client, because I sometimes do fairy tales with clients. We work through and we see the everlasting message from our ancestors. And there are some stories like Christmas Carol, which are sort of modern fairy tales.
It's shamanic, isn't it? You know, Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future. You get that therapeutic. And also, if you look at 12-step recovery, it's a 4th step and an 11th step, a 12th step. It's all shamanic work. It's the underworld, the middle world. You know, it's going to different worlds, isn't it? He's literally, it's amazing. Dickens seems channeled, doesn't it, as a piece?
Yeah, it feels like it wasn't actually written by one man. It feels like it's a story that's always been there that suddenly popped out.
It's so profound, isn't it?
And to have it profound and silly at the same time.
Right, yeah, to make it silly, because that lets the movement, doesn't it? Like the shamanic stuff, working with animals or going to the different worlds, or the drums. It's like, when it's silly, because a good belly laugh, like a good orgasm, moves all that breath through the body. So when it's silly, deep joy is the most radical activism we can actually go to in a way, because it shifts so much energy. And you're right. So the Muppet Show doing Christmas Carol is like really shifting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
What more could you want?
You couldn't want any more. No.
So, your favourite Christmas song?
John Lennon, So This Is Christmas.
Do you know, one of the advantages of living in Germany is the shops don't play Christmas carols or Christmas songs. So you don't hear, Noddy Holder of Slade yell, "It's Christmas" 3 million times. Except I went past a Christmas market, and coming out of the Christmas market was, "And so this is Christmas, and what have you done?" Yeah. And I thought, it's a really good song.
It's a really good song. Because I think for me, one of the essences of Christmas, of course, I love to slow down and be a bit quiet. One of the essences is that chance to really think about others and connect with others and connect with community. So I think that song, John Lennon's language around thinking about others, thinking about, I think, on Christmas Day, even if it's just checking in on neighbours or checking in on a project, or, I've got a friend who's absolutely marvellous with the charities she gives to. She's very specific to certain charities, and I gave to certain charities, but it upped so now I'm making sure, I'm giving to a refugee charity and a food charity and a charity that's for unhoused young people in Brighton. Do you know what I mean? And also I'm going to try and make a link with a couple of those charities. So it's like, I think that song reminds me, how am I thinking of others? Because I really love the idea of how are we creating community? How are we coming together? And that maybe the essence of Christmas is about connection. And I love that. And I like to be reminded, how can I think of others? What can I do for others? And it doesn't mean, the detriment of people resting, because I think we need to rest, and some people overfill and overgive, but it takes me out of myself as well. How can I think of others in a really loving, in a nice way,
I must admit, when I listen to the words "Happy Christmas, war is over," and when I have Ukrainian clients, there are a lot of Ukrainians in Berlin, because we're like one country away from the Ukraine. You sort of think that song was in the 70s and, war is not over with this Gaza, but just the wish for peace comes through. So it was oh my gosh, I haven't heard that song for ages, and thinking the world doesn't change, war isn't over, but a beautiful song. So mine is, unfortunately, it's a song you've probably heard 3 million times as you've done your Christmas shopping. I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day by
Ah,
Wizard. Do you know that one?
lovely song. It's touching.
A childhood memory, because I was like 15 when that song came out. So the 70s actually was a period where nearly all of the songs that we sort of think of as Christmas songs all came out. There was something about glam rock, all sparkly, that brought in great Christmas songs.
That's very significant that maybe that is the biggest period of Christmas songs. It's interesting.
So let's go to the next category, which is famous Christmas or favourite Christmas traditions. So what is your favourite Christmas tradition?
Well, I mean, I do adore, obviously, this is all pagan, isn't it? But I do adore mistletoe and that there's a reason to kiss, the wreath, there's also the tree, the evergreen. It's that kind of, again, pagan and Norse myths around the evergreen, the tree, and reminding that things are evergreen. You probably know the myth of Tristan and Isolde. She was an Irish princess meant to marry the King of Devon and the King of Cornwall. And she fell in love with his nephew, Tristan, on the boat over. Her maid gave her that she made a magic potion because she knew she was marrying an older guy. So she made herself a magic potion to help her with her wedding night. And the maid gave it to her on the boat over by mistake. And she fell in love with Tristan. And then King Arthur basically was given the duty to, like Solomon, decide what was the fate of Isolde, Tristan, and the King of Cornwall. And King Arthur said, you can have her half the time and Tristan can have her half the time. Choose your half. And the King of Cornwall said, I choose when all the leaves have dropped, and I will make a woman of her in winter. And Isolde said, there is no time ever in the year when all the trees have no leaves because they're these evergreen leaves. And she was able to go and live with Tristan in Scotland forever in love because it was a decreed thing. And he, by saying, I'll have you when all the leaves are gone. So that's Christmas, these evergreen leaves, which reminds us that we're evergreen. The wreath, the turning of the wheel, Christmas cards, I'm not brilliant at them, but, it's a reminding of the wheel, the turning, midnight mass. I actually really like midnight mass, even though I can get a bit tired by 11, but still, I love this idea of the candles and that connection and the singing and the songs. Ice skating, we have ice skating where I live at Christmas. And also, of course, in England, where I live in Brighton, we have a thing called Santa Run, where people dress up as Santa on Christmas Day and have a run, or Christmas Day, in Chesterfield, they dress up and have a Christmas swim. And then there's also the 12 days of Christmas, if you like that, to go inward and actually think about things in quite a different way. Let there be the retreat, the silence.
So I'm afraid I'm going to have to push you and get you to choose just one of them.
I think, and it's really funny because I'm going to have to go and get some, I think it's mistletoe. Maybe being a sex and relationship therapist, I just think how sweet in an English culture to actually have a reason to kiss, because of the tradition of fanar innuendo in English culture, pantomime, where it's all like under the hat. And we have this tradition, which is obviously druidic, that we put something that says we can have a kiss. It says there's something kind of interesting there.
Well, you've actually got my favourite Christmas tradition, which is one I can't do here in Germany because they don't have it in Germany, and that's the Christmas pantomime. I just loved it as a child, and as an adult, both of my significant partners have not come from England. So to take them to a pantomime and try and explain what Roland Rat has to do with Cinderella, and I love them making the cake. I love when they break the mirror of the dame and she dresses up and then somebody has to pretend to be the dame and they do the movements, all the classic sketches, and It's Behind You, and Anita Harris dressed as a pantomime boy slapping her thighs, and oh gosh, who have I seen? Christopher Biggins as the pantomime dame, and the costumes and the bright, when they do the pantomime walk down and everybody's in bright glittering costumes and singing some silly pop song in the middle of the thing. I just loved pantomime.
No, you've just reminded me, because of course there was French farce. And of course, a lot of the Greek plays, some of them were very sexy, and Roman things as well. But French farce with, running around and having affairs. But the English pantomime is a whole strange concoction of humour and farce and innuendo and twisting and people taking on different gender roles and playing around with gender and sex and innuendo. It's actually... There isn't pantomime anywhere else. It's a British thing, which is interesting when you put it like that. All the twists and changes in panto, it's interesting.
Although one Christmas when I was in Germany many, many years ago, there was no pantomime, but what they had in a huge, huge football stadium was an oldies concert. And the top of the bill were, I don't know if you know this song, Middle of the Road, and their famous song, Chirpy, Chirpy, Cheep, Cheep. And if you've ever been in a football stadium-sized place with everybody singing, "Where's your mama gone? Where's your mama gone? Far, far away. Last night I heard her singing her song. Ooh, come on, join in. Chirpy, 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 cheep, chirpy, cheep, cheep, chirpy, chirpy, cheep, cheep, chirp."
That's brilliant.
And it was so popular, they sung it twice.
It's brilliant. Actually, I was just thinking that with it. I know it's different, but because you're in Germany, you have Oktoberfest, and there is a lot of kind of playing with gender and costume, and it's not pantomime, but there is that German sort of playing, isn't there?
Yeah, and they also do carnival in a very big way, where,
yes.
If you go into a restaurant with a tie on, the waitress will come and chop the tie off. And so, you wear a bad tie, and there's lots of silly songs.
Yes.
That I don't know, something about silly songs. I love silly songs. So, I mean, the reason why they love Chirpy, Chirpy, Cheep, Cheep is because it's like a lot of their pop songs. They like Schlager songs, which are sort of ones that you get a beer and you go backwards and forwards. It's called schunkeling. So
lovely
these sort
word.
of songs, these songs are great for schunkeling. And
oh yes, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine the
where's
shape.
your mama gone? Where's your mama gone?
Brilliant. That's wonderful. Mm.
So, what's your favourite type of Christmas party?
Oh, you mean before Christmas? All kinds of different parties. You mean like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll go first on this one then.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't actually like them terribly much at the time, but I rather have a fondness and a nostalgia for office Christmas parties. Because when I used to work at radio stations, we used to have an office Christmas party. I mean, one year, the management booked the bootleg Beatles to entertain us. So, we had these people pretending to be John Lennon and Paul McCartney and Ringo and George Harrison doing Love, Love Me Do and all of those other silly songs. Well, they're not silly songs, but they're great songs, and all dancing around and sort of seeing a different side of your colleagues than you saw beforehand. And now, of course, I don't have any colleagues that we have office parties with. So I sort of am rather nostalgic for the office Christmas party.
I love that you brought that in, because actually I'd totally forgotten about this, but I worked for the National Theatre, and we had enormous Christmas parties where they had themes like the 20s or the Titanic or you name it, and they would have bands and music, and it was like all of the National Theatre who wanted to come. They took over the National Theatre, had an office party, and it was absolutely dressed up, and seeing everyone fully dressed up and fully having fun, and it was like they were turned on, the lights were turned on, and it was a really nice. I mean, I think it was for me a really. I felt more connected in those parties with the people because they were not working and they were able to relax. Yeah, it was lovely.
So, what's your favourite Christmas food?
Well, I'm not so, all those mince pies and Christmas pudding and all that kind of thing. I'm not so keen. I don't drink alcohol, and I like a Christmas mix. I actually like I will have a taste of mulled wine. That to me is absolutely amazing. And that to me is Christmassy with all the, cinnamon and nutmeg and the spices and all that orangey stuff and kind of rings tones of the East, doesn't it? All that I love. But I'm not so keen on, I eat meat. I don't mind a bit of turkey, but I'm not like, I don't have the same, it has to be this. I don't have that, nice meal, great. But I do like those smells. I think I like, that tree and the smells of that mulled wine. And maybe I like watching other people eat mince pies. I don't really eat them myself, but I do like that evocative, the smell of all that. And I like it is nice, roast potatoes, Yorkshire pudding. It is gravy. It is really nice, isn't it? Yeah, but I don't have a kind of, it has to be this. But I think some people do, but that's fine, so yeah.
Well, the variety of Christmas baking in Germany is just extraordinary. And at the heart of all of it is marzipan, which is something my mother hated. So we never had marzipan icing on the Christmas cake, which meant that the icing, the sort of royal icing, went directly onto the cake. So it always used to shatter and break because she didn't like marzipan.
Oh, that's
And as a child, my grandmother had a sweet shop. I mean, what could be better than a grandmother with a sweet shop?
Unbelievable.
We were allowed to eat anything we liked, and from when we were there, because she lived in London and we lived in Bedford, so we didn't go to the sweet shop very often.
Oh, my God.
And she had, all these weird and wonderful chocolates. So it wasn't just the regular Cadbury's and Mars type of products. She would have them from foreign countries too.
Oh, my God.
Lindt and Suchard and other sort of brands that were sort of very
exotic.
Unusual in the 60s.
Yeah.
But she also used to have the one thing that we didn't eat. She used to have little marzipan fruit that you could have. So that was the one thing I didn't eat. But as an adult, I've learnt to love marzipan. So you get it in Stollen. So I love Stollen. And they find new ways of doing Stollen. So you can have Stollen bites, little tiny pieces of Stollen, or you can have a whole cake.
Amazing. I think Germany and Austria, obviously every country in the world, but I think Germany and Austria really, there's a big thing with the way they do cake and biscuits and all that, isn't it? It's big. Yeah.
And they have another thing that I love that apparently are just Christmassy, but, I could eat them the whole year round. They're just not in the shops the whole year round, called Dominostein, which are sort of a bit of jelly and cake with, so it's a bit like a sort of Jaffa cake, but it's sort of tall and looks like the size of a counter that you could play drafts with, sort of kind of thing, if it was quite a fat one. And it's just like 2 bites, and it's absolutely delicious.
Wow. So you've ended up in heaven.
I've ended up in heaven, and actually we live round the corner from an Italian delicatessen, and they are selling 5 different types of, what do they call the panettone?
Oh, yeah.
And we're working our way through the 5 different types of panettone.
That's so funny.
And if we're not quite certain which one we like best, we'll go back and do them all again.
That's so sweet, isn't it?
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material and other benefits.
So we'll come on to your advice for making the most of Christmas.
Yes, no, I think it's really nice to talk about this, even though obviously everybody's different and everybody needs different things. And it's obviously about attuning to yourself. But I think, are there ways to take space and rest? People's lives are very busy, or if people are going to be on their own, how do you need to manage that so that it feels like a pleasure, not like you're missing out? And so if you are in a situation with family or with people that may feel too much, how can you take breaks? Can you go for a walk? Can you arrange that? Or if you've got a partner and you're going to your partner's people, can you make a plan about how you handle that, which might be little mini breaks through the day or a 10-minute check-in with your partner, I always think, like, if you can have little plans, if they can change. If you've got little plans, you can make it really work. It's like creating an intentional Christmas. And how is this going to work for you so you hold you there? And the other thing is that sometimes it can be so special to think, I know people who may be going through divorce, or they're not with their kids, or they might have their kids for a small amount of time, or whatever, but things that cause people quite a lot of grief, or they've lost someone or whatever. So what is going to support you? What's going to help you? Sometimes it helps that we're thinking of someone else. Sometimes it helps to think, this is how I can treat myself as precious. And maybe take a little book and make some notes, because this time of year can go very fast, like you said, with office parties or this race sometimes this time of year. Or people, the other thing is people overspend, and there's these adverts and pressure, especially people with children. I think there's a lot of pressure to spend money that people don't have. And so I'd say, can you get support around that? There are free things, there are low-cost things, and there's even free groups. Like there's recovery groups around money, Debtors Anonymous, or Under Owners Anonymous, or where I live in Brighton, we have charities that help people around money, because I think one way of taking care of yourself is not putting yourself in debt at this time of year as well, because trying to buy so much or do so much and losing that sense of your groundedness. So are there ways, even now, even if you're very busy, just take 5 minutes and write about how you're going to hold and contain yourself? Because I know I hear about this, that, there are parents who put themselves in debt to give to their children or families, and that's hard. And then kids also feel the pressure because they go back to school and other kids have got more exciting presents. So how do you manage this so it's calm and doesn't go out of hand? And I'm wondering whether a little notebook, maybe sit in a cafe and make a few little notes, if you can, to help yourself around this time of year.
So my advice for making the most of Christmas is to accept the Christmas that you're having. I think, like your mother and that Christmas that she threw you all out, you have to accept that your children have reached the difficult teenage time where they're going to be a complete and utter pain sometimes. You have to accept, the fact that in my case, both my parents are dead. And if you spend your time thinking about Christmases past, you're not really in Christmas today. If, like last year, one of our guests got a little bit tired and emotional, and, you accept they're tired and emotional, and this particular guest was ordered to go to bed. And he said, I don't want to go to bed. And we said, yes, you are going to bed. And he came back half an hour later, a lovely guest again.
Fantastic.
But, you have to accept the Christmas that you're having. And there's not the yardstick of, what is a good Christmas and a bad Christmas. Because, in every Christmas, there is a sort of this. I've got coming back in a couple of weeks' time one of my favourite guests from the past who gave me this most beautiful question. And the question is, what is the feeling trying to tell you?
Lovely.
That's Carla McLaren, and I'll be having her on the programme in a few weeks' time. A wonderful guest. I mean, I'm sort of thinking my advice is sort of, what is this Christmas trying to tell me? What is it that I've got to accept, and what is it I've got to face that I sort of don't want to face? And I think we try to use Christmas as a make-believe time so that we don't have to accept things we don't want to have to accept. And generally, trying not to accept things that we need to accept is nearly always going to be making the whole situation far worse.
Do you know, it's so funny. I really love that. And what I heard was that Christmas is traditionally, in the pagan sense, a very strong time, let alone if we didn't do the 25th of December, just that time of the year with the solstice and with that darkness and then the light going down and then it starts to emerge later on, is an intense time. And so when people have these intense Christmases and it's not what they like and not what they think, that's part of the growth of that time of the year, the going in and experiencing that intensity. So I love that. Accept what it is, wherever it is, however you are. And it shifts it from that. It should be something. That's the pain, not the day. It's the shoulding. It's like relationships, isn't it? The pain is the disappointment that this person isn't what you think they should be in any connection.
Or what you yourself should be. That's even more painful.
Even more painful. Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the worst. I had a beautiful aunt, a great aunt I adored, and she was not a small woman. She was the right size. It suited her. She always looked amazing. But she had a tape going in her head that she was too big. But when she was dying and older, she was too thin. She was so much too thin that they had to feed her extra and do certain things to feed her extra. But she kept saying, I'm too fat. And it was such a striking thing. She wasn't from the era of going to therapy, wasn't in that time. But it just was striking how she thought her husband might go off and have an affair. He was absolutely not going to. And she thought she was too fat. And these were on repeat. It was so striking how if we don't deal with our tapes and our stories that we keep telling ourselves, like our shouldings, like with this, if we don't deal with them, like a record player that's stuck, it was just stuck. The evidence was absolutely the other way, but she couldn't stop saying it.
So my final question, which is a question I often ask my clients and my guests here on The Meaningful Life, I'm going to do a twist on it. So instead of what makes life meaningful for you, what makes Christmas meaningful for you?
I mean, for me, it is thinking about others in, I would hope, a greater sense. Meaning, can I consider and open my heart to others and wish them well? Can I do that? Can I, on Christmas Day, around that period, can I be a calm vibrational frequency in myself? Can I be that rather than irritable or shoulding or myself or anyone? Can I contribute by thinking of and wishing well? A bit like the Buddhist, the metta bhavana. Can I wish loving kindness? Can I be in that space in this potent time?
And I think for me, what makes Christmas meaningful is this sense of this eternal festival that we've been doing Christmas for 2 millennia. And in fact, mankind has been celebrating at this time of the year for many, many years before that. And so this desire to celebrate the dark with light is a sort of a really basic human need. And so just stepping into that forever time rather than getting too hooked up with exactly what form it takes, I think is what makes Christmas meaningful. It sort of gets you in contact with all of your ancestors, and not just your own ancestors, but the ones going all the way back again as well.
So beautiful.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but the conversation continues for supporters of The Meaningful Life, where we're going to be talking about the seasons of Christmas, how at different ages we have different Christmases, and how the key is to recognize yours and dive in. So we'll be talking about that in just a moment. And if you want to hear the bonus material, you can give a Christmas present to me and to yourself by subscribing directly via Apple or Spotify. And if you want to become a supporter of The Meaningful Life, here are the details.
You've been listening to The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. You can follow Andrew on Twitter, like him on Facebook, and please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Making, editing, and distributing The Meaningful Life comes with substantial costs, and we'd like to ask for your help. Visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material for every program, send in a letter to be discussed by Andrew and his guests, and join a community of other people seeking to make their life meaningful. At the gold level, you get even more benefits. Production of The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall is by Michael Dooney. Social media by Madeleine Healy. Sound engineering and theme tune by Sebastian de la Luz Mendoza. And I'm Susie Colick. Please tell your friends and spread the word. Thank you.